following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Box score from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 49th Street. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and we have a panel of mavens to talk to Mr. Bock. David Hubler is here.
Good evening.
How are you, David?
Fine.
And Alan Blumpkin.
Hello there, everybody.
All right, and the man himself is Hal Bock, and I'm going to ask him, what's the score, Hal?
Well, the score tonight, gentlemen, is 425-0. And the 425 represents the number of people who voted in the Hall of Fame balloting, and the 0 represents the number who left Mariano Rivera off their ballots. The first unanimous selection in the history of the Hall of Fame voting. It's a tremendous honor for a great, great relief pitcher, perhaps the best relief pitcher in history, certainly the best in our time. And it's an exciting time for the Yankees. They also got Mike Mussina in, and Roy Halladay, and the designated hitter Edgar Martinez. So it'll be four electees from the baseball writers, two others from the Today's Era Committee, Harold Baines and Lee Smith, the other relief pitcher. So it should be an interesting weekend in Cooperstown. But the story of the day is Mariano Rivera becoming the first unanimous selection in the Hall of Fame balloting. And I'm curious about what you guys think about the unanimous honor for Mariano and what you think about the other electees.
All right, start with David Hubler.
Well, I couldn't be happier, frankly, as a lifetime Yankees fan and former resident of Panama, where Mariano hails from. I think it's a great honor. I was thinking to myself, it's an incredible honor to be the first elected to the Hall when you consider who's in it already. I mean, it's just it's almost impossible to think that Mariano is the very first. But I was also wondering, suppose Babe Ruth had been the first unanimous. It might have been possible. Would the honor be any greater to say that Mariano now joins Babe Ruth as the only two unanimous selections to the Hall of Fame? I don't know. It's just such a unique honor to be elected unanimously. I don't know if you could top it by linking it to a Babe Ruth unanimous selection, but it's awesome when you consider who else has been elected in years past. Off the top of your head, you can come up with maybe a dozen great ball players who got in but did not get enough votes to be unanimously elected. So, and of course, I'm glad Mike Mussina
can tell us about all the Hall of Famers that weren't, all the greats that weren't elected.
Oh, it can go starting from Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb to anybody. Basically, and one of the people brought this out, that the ballot used to be secretive. Now, if you got one or two that didn't vote for Mariano Rivera, their names would be released publicly.
Well, it was. Remember that fellow, the Boston writer?
The Minnesota writer in 1967, who did not vote for Carl Yastrzemski as the American League MVP, costing him unanimity. There's a Minnesota writer who voted for Cesar Tovar against all everything that was accepted at that point. And the guy was exposed, and I'm sure he probably didn't get another MVP vote, have another MVP vote for the rest of his career.
Yeah, but you were talking about how it was such an embarrassment because when the balloting became public. But if you recall, just a few months ago, a Massachusetts sports writer said he wasn't going to put.
He changed his mind because
he changed his mind because it was public opinion.
He would have stood out. Yeah,
that's right. Public opinion made him an anathema in the baseball.
Exactly.
world.
Yeah.
You know, the interesting thing is, generally speaking, you always found a guy, a voter, who would say, well, this guy's going to get in the Hall of Fame. Mariano Rivera is no-brainer. He's going to go in the Hall of Fame. But I don't want him to be unanimous. I don't want anybody to ever be unanimous, so I'll leave him off my ballot. Well, that didn't happen this year. Everybody voted for him.
No, it becomes the unanimity of the Hall of Fame ballot took on a life of its own.
Well, you know,
when you had Griffey Jr. and Seaver and others come, very, very close. The whole thing, the guy was going to get in unanimously or not, but the whole thing of 100% took on a life of its own, where it almost became primary to the actual election.
Yes, but now that it's been broken, here's an opportunity. Well, will Jeter be elected unanimously? The myth, the aura is broken. It's like when the Cubs won the World Series, after 108 years or whatever it was.
You're right.
The great story is over. I mean, I remember when the Mets won their World Series. It said, this wonderful lousy team is no longer a wonderful lousy team.
Yeah.
You're right.
Then
you're right.
The pressure
David,
was on to repeat and to be good from there on for the Mets. They didn't come back to the World Series till '73.
Well, that's neither here nor there. I mean, we're talking about a team that was so terrible. I don't want to get onto that because we've talked about the Mets plenty. But just the point is that once the myth, once the whole notion of unanimity and impossible odds are broken, the team falls back among the rest of the league. It's just, or the players.
David, Hal and Ralph, the first situation I ever remember that's akin to this, when I was 12 years old in 1955, and the Brooklyn Dodgers finally won a World Series. It took them forever to win a World Series in Brooklyn. When they went out to Los Angeles, it took them 2 years.
Right.
But the whole that the Dodgers will never win, it'll be a miracle if the Brooklyn Dodgers ever won a World Series. Once they did in 1955, that was, David was right. That was the end of the impossibility.
Yeah, it's like a fever. Once the
fever
breaks, you're back to normal.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things I want to point out. First of all, I don't question Mariano being unanimous. I think he deserves it without any question. He was a terrific pitcher, terrific relief pitcher. But Willie Mays was the best 5-tool player I ever saw. Hank Aaron hit 755 home runs, and in my book remains the home run king. And they weren't unanimous. Joe DiMaggio wasn't unanimous. Ted Williams wasn't unanimous.
Right.
Musial, Mantle, not of them.
Tell me that those players were any less great than
No, I'm not. But what I'm trying to point out is the voting was not public when they got in. They say, this one or two jerks didn't vote for Henry Aaron or didn't vote for Willie Mays. The names weren't released. Everything has become public. Almost half the ballots are the ballots are released before the day today. They keep track of who's at what percentage. Everything is so.
To release his ballot, it's not released automatically.
But I think a lot of them feel pressurized to because look at it. Do you remember the years before MLB Network turned this into a TV show?
Of course I do.
Yeah, of course. So I mean, I was just discussing with a friend of mine. Says you may not like the changes. There's a lot of changes I don't like that have come into baseball, football, basketball, whatever, but they're there. And I don't have the power to undo. I don't have the power to undo any of them.
There's no business like show business.
I know that, and that's exactly what sports is. ESPN, Entertainment and Sports Programming Network.
I point out to you that in a week or so we're going to have the Super Bowl, and it's going to be a 6:30 start.
It always
It's
is.
going to be 7 hours of programming before the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Super Bowl related programming. 7 hours.
Yeah, no, I said for any prisoners that act up in jail, they should be forced to watch the entire 7 hours of the Super Bowl pregame shows.
That's a good idea. Speaking of the entertainment aspect of it and the TV commercialization, whose bright idea was it at MLB to announce the Hall of Fame balloting on the same day that the Oscar nominations came out? I mean, that was crazy. The Oscars just swept the news cycle.
Yeah, that's also been very corrupted. Yeah.
That they announce it at 6 o'clock. Used to be they would announce it at 2 o'clock, and the theory was that if you announce it at 2 o'clock, and this is a long time ago.
Yeah, I know what you're going to get to.
Announce it at 2 o'clock, that the morning newspapers would have time to interview the winners, and it wouldn't be a deadline type of thing. But now, at 6 o'clock, it's considered prime time for news, or TV news, and that's why it's done at 6 o'clock. So it's gotten away from, as everything else has, from print journalism, and they cater to the TV world.
Oh yeah,
but they're not locked in by the day, are they, Hal? I mean, it's not like this today. It's not like they're locked in by the day. The 22nd of January isn't the day.
No, it used to be much earlier.
Sure, that's what I'm saying.
And the Oscars used to be in April. Now they're at the end of February.
They ended it on the same. The two came out on the same day, and I thought, well, gee, that's going to take away a good bit of luster.
I don't know what the theory was in changing the release date, but it used to be much earlier.
Yeah, the Oscars were never on. They were on in early April. Yeah, they moved them to the end of February. So of course,
31st.
Yeah.
And the announcement would be a week or so later.
Now, look, you want to talk about TV? Look at what they did yesterday with the football games. New Orleans was indoors. That could have been played at any time. The Kansas City, it was 10 degrees there, and they made that the late game because they figured the Patriots would draw more people in than the Rams or Saints.
Game. It's a sexier game.
That's why they had Dallas playing the time games before they were eliminated.
Yeah, well.
And isn't it interesting that the president of the United States calls up Boston or New England and congratulates them, and doesn't call up the Rams to congratulate them?
Well, he's got a big booster in the owner of the Patriots, and he's in bed with the owner of the Patriots, so he's going to call them up. He loves them.
And maybe he doesn't have enough money to buy hamburgers for both squads, if he bought. He had to pick
don't
one.
Knock hamburgers. Hamburgers are very good.
I understand. I love them myself.
There you go. See?
Let's get off of him. He's disgusting, okay?
Yes, for sure. Hey, while we have a short panel, I would like to hear from David and Hal some stories about working together in the NYU or on the NYU newspaper.
Square Journal.
Yeah.
Well, we never did.
So,
David followed me.
Yeah.
I'm an old man. David.
I was there. We were there. We passed like 1 year together, and
yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I started out writing. I started out actually writing cross country. I remember my first assignment was to go out with the NYU cross country team.
Oh, that was my first one. I wrote for the Pitt News.
To go out to Seton Hall.
See cross country, yeah. Dad, I'm sorry for interrupting. I just had to get that in. I apologize.
That's all right.
I used to cover cross country in Van Cortlandt Park.
Right.
They ran cross country up there. But
yeah.
My first assignment with that newspaper was freshman basketball, and we had some great freshman basketball team. We had Satch Sanders on that team. We had Russell Cunningham was the point guard, and Whitey Busick, and we had Al Barden. We had some great freshman team. They were better than the varsity, and that was my assignment. I used to cover freshman basketball. But then we moved on, and I became the managing editor and later co-editor-in-chief.
Hey, I had the same title 2 years
There you go. See?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I was there.
And my early years was following that point guard Reiner.
Mark Reiner.
Mark Reiner.
Yeah, he later coached basketball at Brooklyn College.
And he was a transfer from North Carolina State, right?
Yeah, and he was a tremendous shooter.
Blonde
and then
kid.
we had some other great players in our time.
Ashton
passed through there,
and Kramer, Barry Kramer.
Barry Kramer.
Yeah, and
so we had some players.
Oh yeah. In fact, the same thing was true with my when I covered some of the freshman basketball games. That team was Hairston, Kramer, and a couple of other guys that made varsity too, and they too were just about as good and could give the varsity a good game, a good run for its money.
Did either of you have to write headlines?
Sure.
Oh, no, I used to knock when I was on the Pitt News. I used to knock off an article in 15, 20 minutes. It used to take me an hour to write a headline with the pikers and all that other crap. You had to count spaces.
Well, you had to fit it
drove
in.
me absolutely nuts. Yeah.
Yeah,
but that was a fun time. I have great memories of those days.
Oh yeah, it was.
David will remember the J&W print shop in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, yep, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Pastrami sandwiches on Saturday afternoons.
Yes, right? The owners loved us. We'd come out to do the work at the shop to get the paper in shape, and they would buy us dinner. And there was a wonderful kosher style delicatessen about a block or two away. Oh, it was heaven. We would have done it on a daily basis if paper had to come out 3 times a week. Yeah.
Bet.
Oh boy.
Those were great days.
They were.
Hey,
in fact,
let's go around the room. Would you honor the teacher, the journalist teacher that got you into it? Start with you and at the Pitt paper. Who it could be a high school teacher.
No, I wrote my sports editor there was Jim O'Brien, who became. He actually worked on the New York Post here for a while. This is going back to the early 1970s when he was on the Post, and he's written. He went back to Pittsburgh, and he's written quite a few books on the Pittsburgh teams. But he was very, very very, very supportive and and very, very good. And I wanted to do basketball there, but that was taken by somebody. And so the plum assignment I had was my senior year, covering the home football games. It happened to go 9-1 that year and finished third in the country. So I got to meet in the press box where I sat instead of freezing my tail off. I met Emlyn Tennell and Tom Fears, both of whom were on scouting trips.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a very, very good assignment.
Absolutely. I can imagine how cool that must have been to meet Emlyn Tennell.
But Jim O'Brien was my
grew up in New York.
patron saint, so to speak.
Yes. Nice. David, who inspired you?
Well, let's keep the New York Post in line. I was inspired by the executive editor of the New York Post, Paul Sann, whose son was a good friend of mine, and the two of us did an awful lot of things together. And when it came, and Paul was Paul was just an iconic journalist from the old school. He had no college. He just went into it and he began covering the rackets in New York, and it toughened him. He was a real tough old-time, old-time journalist. And I went to him one time and I said, I have a choice. Should I major in journalism or should I take a liberal arts course? And he said, no. He said, you take liberal arts. He said, anything in journalism we can teach you when you join the paper or at whatever paper. So don't go in for that. So I never did major in journalism. We had a faculty advisor. I think his name was Town. Sidney Town, I think was.
Sidney Town.
Yeah. So he popped up every once in a while, but not too often. And I really cut my teeth on Square Journal. I mean, we had Hal was gone by then, but the 1962-63 newspaper strike in the city killed all the newspapers around the Christmas time. We began printing a daily edition and distributing it free throughout the village. We were allowed to use a couple of the syndicated columns from some of the papers, and we covered local news, and we ran around like crazy until the money ran out, and then the Post broke the strike when Dorothy Schiff signed a contract with the union, and that was sort of the end of our experiment in daily journalism. But it was we had a wonderful run, and got a lot of good delicatessen at the same time.
Boy, talk about the Post in those years. They had two columnists named Leonard Cobbett and Leonard Schechter.
Yeah, right.
And they were totally different writing styles, but great in how they presented their columns. Unbelievable.
They had a third Leonard on that staff who was an NYU guy, Leonard Cohen.
Yes.
Cohen was an NYU grad.
I remember that name.
Yep.
Yes.
And what was his name? He wrote about the unions, and he was actually blinded because
Victor Rizel.
Victor Rizel, yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, he was on the Post, and so was he's still a terrific writer. He hosted
Pete Hamill,
right?
Yeah.
He too, Pete Hamill. I spoke to him one time because we were doing an interview, and he started out as a cartoonist, as I did. And of course, we had Paul Sanders, a mutual, a friend, and so we had a real old times day get together, round up. So, but they were great days. I mean, I wouldn't change those for the world. The days I had on the paper. Yeah.
That strike, the union killed itself because, not too soon after that strike ended, the Herald Tribune, World Telegram, and Journal American went away, and the Daily Mirror, which was a bad copy of the Daily News, went away. And I remember they had for a while this World Journal Tribune paper.
Yes.
About 6 months, and went total belly up. It left the city with just the Daily News, the Post, and the Times.
That's right. Right. Yeah, killed 4 papers actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they killed themselves.
And of course,
with
they killed themselves, of course, because it was the compositors and the linotype operators.
Yeah.
That all went out of business, and they would have anyway because of the computerization that was coming in. And
how were you doing the NYU paper when they had I think a 3 or 4 week strike in December 1958?
I was.
Because there's no newspapers. I remember I was living in Belrose, Queens at the time, walking to Nassau County, which was a 20-block walk on a Sunday, and then I found out that Newsday didn't publish on Sundays back then. But I remember it was when the Giants had won the Summerall field goal, the playoff game, and they lost the overtime game to the Colts. That was all during the strike.
Where'd you live in Belrose?
Vividly.
Where'd you live in Belrose?
I was at NYU at that time.
I didn't go into 59.
I went to the school newspaper. I went to Square Journal the first day I was at NYU.
Wow.
Because I knew that was where I wanted to be. I wanted to be on the newspaper. And this is a funny story. In my second semester at NYU, I got a call from the sports information director, a guy named Hy Kersner, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in working on the World Telegram and Sun?" And I almost jumped through the telephone. I said, "Are you kidding? Of course why? What?" He said, "Well, they're changing schoolboy editors. The schoolboy editor had been a guy named Xander Hollander."
Yeah, right.
He wrote some guides every year. Yeah, I know the name.
And the new schoolboy editor is a young man named Phil Pepe, and he needs an assistant. And if you call him up, he'll make an interview. He'll have an interview with you, and maybe you get it. So I called him up, and he said, "Sure, come on down." Now, I'm an upper freshman at NYU, and I'm enrolled in Air Force ROTC. Why, I don't know, but I was. And you had to wear a uniform. You had to wear an Air Force ROTC uniform. And on the day that I had my interview, I was in uniform. So I marched down to 125 Barclay Street wearing my Air Force uniform, and I walk in, and Phil Pepe, one of the greatest guys I've ever come across in my life, takes one look at me and says, "What in the world is this all about?" But I impressed him, I guess, with my knowledge of schoolboy sports in New York, and he hired me. And I spent all of my college days, 4 years at NYU, working at the World Telegram and Sun after school, in the evening. I would go in at 5 o'clock at night, and I would take high school sports scores, football, basketball, whatever was being played, and I would get to write a little three paragraphs or 4 paragraphs that would appear in the paper. Here I was, 17 or 18 years old, and I was being published every day in a major New York newspaper. I can't begin to tell you how thrilling that was for me.
Yeah,
so, and your dad, no doubt. Am I correct on that?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Ralph?
I said, and your dad, I'm guessing.
My dad always supported me, and he always encouraged me, and of course we've gone over the story about the column, the name of the column, Bock Score.
Right.
My dad was a great advocate, and I'm grateful that I had him for a father.
Yeah, I'm glad you made him proud that day.
Very nice story, Hal.
Walter was like,
very nice story.
I have a terrific sports story from my NYU days. The first time I got to cover the basketball team, which was really good in those days, was also the first flight I ever took. We flew to Utica, New York, to play I think it was Syracuse, and it was going to be a doubleheader televised on ABC, Channel 7 in New York, on a Saturday afternoon. And we flew up Friday afternoon, and we checked into the hotel, and we had a really lovely steak dinner all laid out on a special room for the team. And there's nothing to do in Utica after 6 o'clock at night on a Friday night. So everybody went to bed early. The team was required to get an early night's sleep. And I woke up the next morning, and NYU had another newspaper up on the Uptown campus, and the editor calls me on the room phone, and he says, "Take a look out the window." I look out the window. You see nothing but white. Something like 30-some-odd inches of snow had fallen overnight. Nelson Rockefeller, the governor, declared the state an emergency state. The state police were out on the highways looking for the buses because the other 3 teams were fairly local. They were going to bus over. Syracuse, I think it was Holy Cross, and I forget the third team to make up the two games. They were looking for them because nobody could find them on the highway. Everything was shut down. So we walked over to the arena. Fortunately, we were in walking distance, so we all walked over to the arena, and the team went into the dressing room, and they began to change and sit around. And so the other sports editor and I wandered around down onto the court, and Kurt Gowdy was going to do the game on play-by-play. And Kurt Gowdy was there with another colleague of his, And Kurt Gowdy had been an All-American, by the way, at Colorado, University of Colorado. And we started playing 2-on-2 on the basketball court where the game was going to be played. And maybe a dozen fans showed up and were sitting in the stands waiting for something to happen. Outside the arena, I saw this on the monitor, the color man who was going to do the game, I forget who it was, you saw the screen was totally white, and suddenly a car window rolls down, and there he is. He'd come in from the other side of the car, and when the camera started to roll, he rolled down the window. And he said, "Welcome to Utica, New York. It's 32 degrees or whatever it was, and there's 3.5 feet of snow on the ground." And they finally got the game going. What they did was the NYU agreed to play whichever team showed up first. It didn't matter. And because they had to get it on TV. So they actually got the game. I think it was Syracuse or Holy Cross showed up. NYU ended up losing the game. So after the game, we all trudged over to the train station by foot because there was nothing moving. And we waited for the next train to come in to go down to Penn Station. The 12 o'clock noon train came in about 3:30, 3:45 in the afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And we got on the train. Fortunately, we got seats because every few miles, the train would stop along the way and pick up stranded passengers, whether they were at a train terminal or wherever they were, just standing there by the train tracks, trying to get someplace. So within a matter of an hour or so, there are people standing in the aisles. They're climbing all over each other. There was no water. The water had run out in those little tanks they have at the end of the cars. You wouldn't dare get up to go to the bathroom because you'd never get your seat back. And the walk through all these people would be just a tough thing to do. So we pulled into Penn Station about 8 o'clock that night, something along those lines, and everyone was just totally drained. I mean, it's just an exhausting day. But interestingly enough, about a couple of years later, Sport Magazine did a story predicting how TV was beginning to take control of sports, and one of the examples they used was that game, that because they had a TV commitment, somebody had to play that game that day.
Huh.
That's quite a story.
By the way, the immortal Onondaga War Memorial Coliseum is still open.
In Syracuse.
Yeah, I think they have a minor league hockey team play up there.
And they have a New York Yankee, Syracuse does, New York Met farm team now.
Yeah, but that's not, the Coliseum was where the old Syracuse Nats used to play. And that, from what I read about that place, it was, the referees make calls against the home team, and they had to be escorted off the court at the end of the game by cops, and they had to go back to wherever they were staying in their referee clothes.
I think the Syracuse University basketball team played there too for a while.
Up until
they built the
Carrier Dome.
Yeah, the Carrier Dome, right?
Yeah, because I saw 2 football games up there. Pitt used to play up there. They in Syracuse have been the big rivals for forever. And the first was in Archibald Stadium, which was
Archibald Stadium. That's right.
Which was horrible. And then the second one was in the Carrier Dome. Archibald Stadium had porta sands. There was no bathrooms there. They had porta sands.
Well,
and it was all open. It was all open. It was like a bowl-shaped thing.
Yeah. I saw about NYU journalism. When I was I guess a junior, maybe a senior. I'm not even sure. The Sigma Delta Chi fraternity asked, "How come you don't have a student chapter?" And I thought, whoa, we should definitely have a student chapter. This is the journalism honorary. So we organized a student chapter of Sigma Delta Chi. And Sigma Delta Chi has a club here in New York called the Deadline Club. At least they did in those days, called the Deadline Club. And they have a dinner every year. So we decided that we were going to try and make a pretty good impression on the Deadline Club. And we Nelson Rockefeller was giving the keynote address at one of their dinners, at one of their events. And you had to wear a black tie. You had to wear a tuxedo. So my co-editor, a guy named Ken Brief, a good friend of mine named Ken Brief, and I rented tuxedos. We went to this dinner, and we covered the speech. We covered Nelson Rockefeller's speech. We then got on a train, dressed in our tuxedos, got on the subway, took it to Brooklyn, and put out an edition of Square Journal with the story of his speech, and then saw to it that the paper was delivered to the hotel rooms, to the hotel and to the rooms of the delegates that morning, the next morning, so that they would have the paper on their doorstep. And we figured that would impress them. And I think it did. I think it did impress them.
Good idea. What a terrific,
One of our guys, and it cost us a few bucks to rent those tuxedos, but what the heck? And one of our guys, a guy named Jeff Gralnick, had his name, had his resume, and he put on his resume Square Journal, the student newspaper at New York University. He went for a job interview, and he was at ABC, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
And at ABC, the guy who was interviewing him circled that Sigma Delta Chi at New York University, and he got the job.
Wow.
And Jeff Gralnick became a foreign correspondent, covered the Vietnam War, and went on to great celebrity within the broadcast industry. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago. But he got that job because we organized an SDX, Sigma Delta Chi chapter at New York University.
Wow.
He was convinced of it, and so were we. So, you never know, as they say.
And when Jeff died,
you never know.
Yeah. When Jeff died, there was an obit on all three networks for him, not just ABC, because I saw them.
Well, he worked at all three networks.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But he started at ABC. Yeah.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
He was a young man, unfortunately, when he died.
Yeah, we
guys.
We used to play from work. We used to put together for about 7 or 8 years. We put together a table and went to the baseball writers' dinner here in New York, and I heard some very, very comments from Mickey Mantle, who was up at the dais both times, twice, and he was 3 sheets. And the first time he was there was to give some sort of an award. I think it was a Good Guy Award to Lee McPhail. And he said, when I was with the Yankees, Lee was the assistant to George Weiss, and he put the meanest, and he used a 12-letter word beginning with C and ending with R that ever lived. So when the Daily News and the little papers reported this the next day with all the blanks, and they said, the Daily News said his comments were irreverent. And they used that incident because women couldn't get into it was stabbed for years and years and years. And after that incident, they banned anybody under 18 and opened it up to women.
Well,
that's the biggest take I've had from the years going to the BBWA dinner.
Well, a lot of press boxes were, barred women.
I know that,
Yeah.
Now you put on ESPN or any of these others, you see, and you've even got a couple of women doing, all men's basketball games.
My good friend in life, not just on Facebook, Sherry North.
The stripper?
Not Sherry North, Sherry Davis. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I was wondering, what kind of friends?
That's a lot. If I remember that shows how old I am.
That was Freudian. I'm back in those days right now. But Sherry Davis was the first friend of the show. She's been on a number of times on the network. She was the first public address announcer in baseball history. The Giants had her in San Francisco, and she tried out for the job with maybe 200 of us I tried out for that same job. This was like in 1989 or something like that. She got it. I didn't. I thought it would be great to be the public address announcer in the major leagues.
Well, we had Bob Shepard for baseball, the Yankees, and the Giants football, and we had John Condon in the Garden.
Right.
Yeah, he was there forever too.
Try to get Bob Shepard's voice down.
Yeah. Bob Shepard has a lot of imitators.
Yes.
Yeah. Now batting for the Yankees.
Not so much anymore.
Not so much anymore.
John Condon one time, they had no out-of-town scoreboard in the old Garden, so he gave some out-of-town score backwards. At the end of three quarters, it's Philadelphia 75, Boston 83, and he got threatening letters for that because of the gamblers.
That was a Friars Club line, by the way. That was great. I caught it. I start the imitation. He goes, not too much anymore.
Now, John Miller, the announcer, did a tremendous, in fact, he did this in one of the baseball writers' dinners. He did a whole imitation of Bob Shepard reading from a diner menu.
I remember hearing him do it terrific.
For breakfast, number 2, scrambled eggs and toast, number 2. That was hysterical.
He did a very good imitation of it. Yes.
He does.
He's going to be unanimous next year, by the way, Jim.
Yes, he will, because the spell has been broken.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't have any. The only number they have before 11 that's not retired is 0.
Yep. And now they're going to have 0.
Martino is taking that.
Yeah.
The police pitcher they just signed, Adam Martino, is going to take that.
The 0. He's going to take 0 or 00.
No,
0. Wow, I never thought I'd love to see the Yankees have a player wearing 0. God.
Well, I don't know.
Gamble wears 0 for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
Oscar Gamble.
I don't think I can look it up. I have a book on Yankees by the numbers that came out a few years ago. I don't think there's ever anybody who was 0 there. And
I'm not sure this is sealed in stone, because there was something about they were waiting for the Yankee, brass to okay it, that he would wear 0.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. What's the big deal? You look at how many pitchers now wear 90 something. I mean, where did
Aaron Judge wears 99?
Yeah, where did that come from?
And why haven't the Yankees retired 31 for Dave Winfield?
Because he and Steinbrenner did not get along too well.
Not at all.
I know, but his kids have taken over, and I don't think his kids got along well with Steinbrenner either.
Well,
so.
Look, I wanted 17 for Rashi, 22 for Reynolds, and 30 for Eddie Lopat, Mel Stottlemyre, and Willie Randolph all retired. But that's not going to happen. When I see somebody wearing 17 or 22, like Clemens wore 22, and I was going nuts with that.
He wore 22 throughout his career, didn't he?
Number 30 as well.
Yes, like Dodger fans. When somebody wears 14, which was Gil Hodges, or 6, which was Carl Furillo, that are not retired.
Yeah. They have a funny way of deciding who gets retired. But what I like particularly about retired numbers is that 42 is retired by every team.
Mariano was the last one to wear that.
That's right.
Right.
He said so on. I watched the interview with him after, they announced the election, and he said that he's very proud of the fact that he was the last one to wear 42.
Hal, did you ever get to interview or know Jackie Robinson?
No, never did.
Okay.
Don't forget, Jackie retired in 1956. I was a freshman at NYU in 1956.
Yeah.
So, no, I never got a chance to talk to him. But there's another example of somebody who wasn't a unanimous choice in the Hall of Fame, and he probably should have been given. I mean, this is a man who changed America. He didn't just change baseball. He changed the country. And if anybody deserved to be a unanimous selection, he did. But he was not.
Did he get in on the first ballot? I don't recall.
Yeah, he got it in 1962.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
To me, the two most important baseball players of the 20th century were Babe Ruth and Jackie Robinson.
Yes.
Because, when the ballots were secret, as Alan was saying, I'm sure there was a good bit of racism involved in the voting.
Exactly. I was talking about that with my son tonight. Hank Aaron and Willie Mays, you can't get better candidates for the Hall of Fame, and yet they missed out by like 20 votes or 15 votes. And my son said, you know what that is? That's racism.
Sure, he's right.
They wouldn't vote. Some of the writers, old writers, wouldn't vote for a black player.
Yeah, Henry Aaron went in with Frank Robinson, and that was the first because I was up in Cooperstown when Mickey Mantle passed, and I asked if I could see the video of his induction. And guess what? They didn't have any videos of any of these things until ESPN got in the business. The first was the 1982 induction of Henry Aaron and Frank Robinson, this first year that they had videos of this, of the induction ceremonies. But they had audio, so I listened to Mantle and Ford, and then I had them, give me 2 years before with Yogi, and Yogi couldn't wait to get off that platform fast enough.
And Phil Rizzuto would still be.
Phil Rizzuto, that's a classic. It's on YouTube. I've watched that anytime I feel down. I put that on YouTube.
Yes. The scooter.
Yeah. Now it's not a question of whether he deserves it or not, but that talk was just was beyond anything else.
What's very interesting, Hal and I were both Giant fans. We didn't talk much about the Giants. Hal mentioned that Willie Mays was the best 5-tool ball player ever, but we both got such a kick out of talking about the other great teams in New York, the Dodgers and the Yankees. We were so blessed, the four of us, to grow up in that city where the World Series is, it's almost a birthright.
I thought that Alvin Dock was a better player than either Reese or Rizzuto, but he'll never get in.
No. But he's a damn good. If they're in, he should be in, but should they be in? And that
that's a whole other debate. We can do this to the end of time with who belongs and who doesn't belong. Yeah. And
we will. But until then, this has been a great show. We're up against the time barrier here. And I want to thank you both, all three of you, as a matter of fact. Hal, is there anything you want to close with?
Just that I was pleased to see the 100% for Mariano. I thought he deserved it. And as David said, the ceiling is broken now. And I think we'll probably see others and certainly Derek Jeter next year, who will be unanimous choices. So I thought that was a good thing.
One last comment. I wonder whether Musino will wear an Orioles cap or a Yankees cap for his plaque.
Well, the Hall of Fame determines that because Wade Boggs, when he got in, was prepared to take an amount of money from the Tampa Bay Rays to wear the Tampa Bay hat going in. The Hall of Fame put a kibosh on that. They decide.
Well, they should have.
Gary Carter, when it was an expo, and we had Jim Bunning at the Sabre Conference in Louisville in 1997. He went as a Philly, and somebody asked him why he went in as a Philly instead of a Tiger. And he said when he was elected, the Phillies, congratulated him. They did this and they did that. They said the Tigers didn't even get a phone call.
Really?
Yeah. But the Hall of Fame will decide, which cap.
Well, we'll see. So which cap? We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. And since there'll be tons of Yankee fans up there, I think it's leaning toward the Yankees.
Well, he'd be in good company.
Baltimore, though.
Yeah.
He'd be in good company up there with the Yankees.
But which team has the most Hall of Famers? Hal Bock.
The Yankees.
No, The
Giants.
Hall of Famers,
Giants.
the New York Giants.
Yeah, going back into the 19th century, of course.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had Roger Connor and Tim Keefe and Mickey Welch and John Montgomery. Well, they have a lot of 19th century Hall of Famers in there.
The Dark Ages, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dark Ages, and what the era that you wrote about, how with the Tinker Evans Chance Cubs, there was a lot of Giants that got in from those years.
Yeah, that's right.
So the Yankees were, or Hilltoppers or whatever, were scraping the bottom of the barrel. I know it's a trick question.
Change.
Because with the Yankees, Ralph wouldn't have asked.
That's right. You're right about that.
Yeah, I used to do those kinds of things when I wrote trivia. Yeah.
Right.
You know, as much of a Giant fan as I was, I love the memories of the Dodgers and the Yankees.
So, me too.
Almost equally. It just, it almost seems like you couldn't have the Giants without the Dodgers, and you couldn't have either of them without the Yankees.
That was a magical time in New York.
Absolutely.
You had three teams.
Classic baseball.
The cool kids on the corner.
Well, we
arguing
were
every
there
night.
tonight in our minds, and that's
We
what's
were.
very important. Thank you, guys. This was
Okay, thank you. Good night.
All right.
Thank you for listening,
Good night, everybody.
Yep.
Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, David Hubler, Alan Blumpkin, and the man himself, Hal Bock. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all. Adios, everybody. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.